about. Good morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Mambo mazuri.
Mambo sawa. Yes.
You know, kwa faida yule mtazamaji pale nje, mwalimu.
Yes.
Pengine wamekuona, wamekujua. Who exactly is Mr. Lubambo?
Mr. Lubambo is a director of a school, a Vision of Hope Education Center.
Right.
At the same time, I am the Secretary General for Abbet Schools, Kenya. Yes.
Kenya now?
Yes.
It's not in coast alone?
No.
Okay.
It's a national issue.
Kwa hivyo kuna cheo kubwa?
Kubwa kabisa.
Umepewa security?
Kabisa.
Right, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
To begin with, when you are talking about these Abbet schools, ni nini haswa?
Actually, Abbet, short form of Alternative Providers for Basic Education Training. Remember, all along what we know that as far as education is concerned, we had the two major categories of schools. That is the public and also the private. But a time came whereby we had to make some engagement with the stakeholders and the Ministry of Education so that we can categorize some of the schools which were also existing. These schools have been existing for a long time. There are schools which are within the urban and the poor slums, and also the arid and semi-arid areas within the Republic of Kenya. They were so much disadvantaged because they were not categorized anywhere, because these schools are not private, these schools are not public. When I say these schools are not private, they are not private in the manner that they are serving the less fortunate communities down there. They are not benefiting from any funding from the government. So it's a school of need. That is where there is a need of a school, a group of people or an individual has developed an interest of assisting the community. So generally these schools are service delivery schools, and since the year 2001 there were a lot of engagement with the partners, non-governmental organization, and also stakeholders, we being the stakeholders, so that we could come up with a clear category of these schools. So we are happy because our discussions bear some fruits to some extent, because at one time the Ministry of Education started engaging these schools. At the very point, these schools were considered as non-formal schools, schools from the slums. And actually it was not right to call them non-formal schools, because non-formal is a curriculum. There is a curriculum which is known as a non-formal curriculum. But what was happening within these schools was the normal curriculum, meaning that the schools which we are talking about use the same curriculum which was used by the public primary schools and also the private schools.
Right.
So now the government was now at loggerheads because it could not even define these schools. So with that partnership of the Ministry of Education plus other organizations like the UNICEF, which has some greater extent of the interests of the children and also the education, some other organizations which were also doing some education implementation programs, intervention programs, such as Concern Worldwide, they made it clear that the government, that these schools are not non-formal schools, because non-formal is a curriculum, so we better engage them and come up with a clear category of these schools.
Right.
We are happy because in the engagements with the Ministry of Education, it is when now we were taken through by various lawyers and some other stakeholders,
right, to
define these particular schools. Because at a time in Nairobi, it's like the population of the school age going children within the public schools was going down, such that now a place like Nairobi, to find that learners are not even captured within the database of the ministry was not able to now to explain it further. To bring it to the mainstream now, we had to take the engagement. We had a very big forum in Nairobi,
right,
2012, where all the stakeholders and the Ministry of Education gathered at Ufungamano, and the ministry was now very much sincere on us. They told us that you have to define yourself, what you are doing, so that you can be part of the ministry mainstream. Through that forum, we were able to define ourselves. We said, and we told the government, we are trying to complement whatever the government is not able to do. That is the gap which was existing.
Right.
So by complementing, then we gave ourselves a name on that we can now call our schools as complementary schools. So we moved with the Complementary Schools Association of Kenya, because to make an engagement with the ministry, any entity must be registered. So we registered that association. After registering the association, it is when now we started developing the roadmap to come up with a policy on how to regulate these schools, so that we can be part of the categories of the education providers in Kenya. So within that roadmap, finally now we came up with a draft. That draft was concluded at Egerton University, the Egerton 1 University draft. Then another one came up with another draft. Another draft came up which was more modernized, and it was now coming up with as the final draft.
Right.
So we went to KCA University for the polishing of the document, and finally at KICD, whereby now the policy was ready. We left that policy to the Minister of Education to follow up with the ministry itself. Though there were some other issues on legal issues that the Attorney General was also to be engaged. And finally by 2015, the draft was over, and lucky enough, the minister was Mr. Fred Matiang. He was the one who signed the document, and officially we flagged when we launched the document. Now Kenya now has 3 categories of schools: private schools, public schools, and also Abbet institutions. Right,
very true. Now, coming with that clear background and foundation that you've given out, it's so clear that we get to understand what exactly is the Abbet schools. And the next question now, how do I know that my school falls under the category of Abbet?
One, areas of operation. I've already said these areas, these schools are largely found in Mombasa town, Nairobi, Kisumu, and any other growing town. More importantly, to the extent of the arid and semi-arid areas. So if a school falls within Bangladesh, in Mombasa, that one is an Abbet institution. All the slums areas within these capital cities, we will find these schools, because you find that most of the areas people do not have the access to the education institutions. For example, in Mombasa, you find an administrative area like Airport Ward does not have any public primary schools.
True.
So what is complementing within those areas are the Abbet institutions. One, they are charging low. Two, they are within the communities rich. And to a great extent, some of these institutions are supporting the orphans and the poor.
Right.
Yes.
Very true. Now, Mwalimu, I need to understand this first and foremost. You've mentioned that if you're in a locality, if a school is located in a locality that, of course, it's kind of a slum area, then it is kind of qualified to be on Abbet. The question can be, I might have a school that falls under the category of Abbet, but according to how I see it and people see it out there, it portrays itself as a private institution. Does it, can it transist from being Abbet to go to that category, the next category, or what?
As agreed with the policy, once a school becomes an Abbet institution registered by the Minister of Education, there is no way it can become a private institution.
Right.
In fact, some of these institutions are the ones which now they progress, and at long last, they can also be handed over to the government. For example, a school in Kibera, Raila Odinga Education Center, which was started by the former Prime Minister, started like an Abbet institutions, and he used to support that schools in terms of infrastructure, payment of the teachers, and all the running costs of the institution. And when a time came, now there was a greater demand, and the school had an ample land. Later, that school now is a public institution. Yes.
So there is no way if you fall under the category of the Abbet schools,
No.
it's not easy for you to...
No. That the policy is very clear that when you are registered under Abbet, you remain as Abbet. If you are in private, then that one is a business. Nobody can interfere with your business.
Right.
Exactly.
So far, so good now. That the fact that you're already there,
Exactly.
how has the community and the society taken up these schools? Are they embracing you guys or what?
Before the coming of the policy, the schools have already been there. They have been assisting this community. In fact, it is the community demand that pushed seriously to make sure that the stakeholders come into an agreement and come up with a clear policy on how we can regulate these schools, because it is a school and a school only,
right,
and must be regulated, and the only regulator of education is the Minister of Education.
True.
So there is no way these schools could operate outside the bracket of the Minister of Education. Only that the Minister of Education could not have an access to these schools because there was no policy.
Right.
Now there is the policy, now regulation now is very perfect, because the ministry recognizes the existence of these schools, and also the stakeholders are aware of the policy, and somebody becomes an Abbet by choice. You are not forced.
True.
If you feel that you fall under that category, you have the passion to provide education, the less fortunate and the poor, then automatically you do not go outside that bracket. Yes.
Right. Are there any benefits if at all I fall under the category of Abbet school?
My friend, you should have a big heart, because what if you are expecting any other benefit apart from the passion of education, to provide education to the less fortunate? I don't see anything bigger than that. So this one, most of these institutions have been started by self-help groups. These institutions have been started by churches, where the pastor knows that in this area there are so many children who are not going to school, and these parents, some of them are orphans, so the only mother shelter to that child becomes the church. So it's people with a touch, with a human touch. If you are touched by the need of the learners to access education, that is the benefit, and that is the biggest benefit, because we are fulfilling the goal. Even God is for that. Right. Assisting the poor, assisting the orphans, and the less fortunate. Exactly.
And the biggest now point at which we are asking now is that is there a way that is there a call that you can call to the government to assist these kind of schools, because they need a lot of help?
Actually, what we did is a very big step, because from the time they were not recognized to a time that they are now recognized, it's a big step, it's a journey. You see, a journey of 1,000 miles start with one step. So already that one has been done, and I'm sure as per the policy is very much clear. It is now the implementation period. Right. Because I understand, as far as the policy is concerned and the status of the schools, on the better part of side, at my comfort zone as the Secretary General, I know in Mombasa we were able to register about 39 schools. 2015, 2016 we were able to register 39 schools under Abbet category. We moved ahead to Nairobi. We were not so much successful with the implementation of the policy in terms of registration processes. Then we went to Kisumu. Right. As I still sit here, over 26 schools are already registered under this particular category. Once registered, when this registration has been done countrywide, now it is not for us to speak about the Abbet institutions. Right. It is the policy itself, because the policy says once the schools are registered, they are now entitled to benefit from all the government funding in terms of like the grant capitation money which is dispersed to the schools, whereby schools now buy some learning materials for the learners. Right. And at the very beginning, before even the coming of the police, these schools used to be assisted with the government. Right. The Minister of Education had a budget for the non-formal schools, and I'm sure this budget was not less than 100 million per month. Whereby these schools were getting some funding from the government. I remember in Mombasa, over 13 schools were receiving this funding. Nairobi, over 417 schools were receiving that funding. Right. And also in Kisumu and Nakuru, some few schools were getting over 20, 30 used to receive this funding. So this funding ceased because there was no policy. Now it is my conscience. Now if the policy is now in place, if the registration is done in mass throughout the country,
right,
then these schools stand to benefit from the government funding. That one there is no fear. Automatically the ministry will have to give money to these schools.
Definitely. Right. During the time at which we had COVID-19, it was quite a very difficult moment for you guys, I believe.
Exactly.
And how was the situation like, and did you get some kind of help?
It was wow. It was hectic. In fact, we couldn't even imagine. Because as far as COVID was concerned, it is something which nobody was not expecting.
Right.
So it just caught each and every individual unawares. So when it came, we were greatly affected.
Right.
We were affected in a way that some of the learners were transferred, because some of the people shifted their bases of residence. So there was a lot of confusion within our institutions. Remember, our teachers, we are charging in our schools, but we are charging something very little to sustain the running of the schools. And the salaries are not all that high. So when COVID came, we were not able to sustain our teachers. So we went around asking for assistance all over. Unfortunately, we never got one from the government. And we are still insisting the government that at one time, it is not even delay in assisting these institutions, because they do a lot of assisting the government, because we have got a great number of learners within our institutions. And as far as the CBC implementation is concerned, we are giving the government a big support, because many of the learners could not be able to be assisted with the government, because they're not able to access the government institution. So we have a greater stake in terms of the provision of education. So the government so far has never assisted us. Before Corona, during the Corona, after the Corona, we have never have any assistance from the government.
Right.
And we are not getting tired. We are engaging the political leaders so that they can also listen to us and also have an address on all the issues which are affecting our education.
Very true. Right. Now, before we even take a short break here, we understand that Abbet schools kind of collaborate with different entities, different organizations on how they can improve some of can improve the education standards and quality that you guys are offering the services to the learners here, and the likes of which are what we'll be coming to discuss next, and talk about this collaboration with these different kind of entities here.
Actually, I have much to say thank you to so many partners who have come with an interest of doing some education intervention programs in our schools. They have greatly added value in whatever we are doing. Actually, one entity that I would not even forget to talk about or to mention is the EDU team. I know it is a team which approached us sometimes in Nairobi to talk about the digital learning in our schools. Remember, before they came to our subsector, already the government was running with the technology in schools. You know about the laptops in some few schools. We were not assessing that product. So we were very much lucky with the EDU team. It came to our office sometimes back in 2013.
Right.
We made a memorandum of partnership. They wanted to work with our schools within the slums. We were so much great, and we were so much welcoming the idea, because at one point we said it's God who has touched these people to come on our side, to come and assist our learners, because government was taking care of the public institutions. So since that time, the EDU team has done a lot, because they used to cover some schools in the Nairobi slums, Kibera and some other parts of Kwanjenga, and it did well. That program did well, because they came up with some few gadgets, small devices, partnering with the Safaricom.
Right.
So that they developed the app for learning. That app is very much useful. When the CBC was being implemented, they redesigned their system and developed a special app for the CBC curriculum that is covering PP1, PP2, grade 1, grade 2, climbing the ladder. So at one time now, our learners were enjoying that digital platform.
Right, very true.
They were able to learn, and all the learning areas within the CBC, some devices were given to our learners, 40 per gadget in our learners, and also in partnership with the Safaricom, data was also provided for free.
Right.
So it is just the institution benefiting from the platform.
Right.
That one has done a lot of improvement in our schools. So the program extended to Mombasa. Sometimes last year, it covered so many schools in Mombasa. Over 300 and above schools were also covered by this program. They are also intending to extend to Kisumu and some other areas within our network. So that one is also a blessing, because to some extent, in fact, before Corona, the program had started already started in Mombasa. We had moved well, because a big number of schools had already been covered, and they had a very special element which was almost to be piloted in Mombasa. Apart from the gadgets within the schools,
right,
they were intending to provide even the guardians and also parents to be given the gadgets at home, so that if the parent is at home, can follow up whatever is happening, the learning at school.
Very true.
To know my child is doing what in terms of pairing and matching in class. So it gives a feedback to the parent. We were about to pilot them with the parents when COVID broke.
Right.
If we could have done that, so even the time of COVID, the parents could be at a better position to continue with learning at their homes. But that one never picked because of the COVID.
Very true.
Exactly.
But of course, we believe that going forward, it might.
Sincerely speaking, the team is very much ready, well prepared, and it has the capacity, and it is equal to the task. Yeah.